Greetings and welcome. I'm making some changes to my channel and I really hope you guys will like it. I want it to be more personal, so next time you're gonna see my face, like it or not. Input evil laugh here. In the meantime, here are some of my personal favorite poltergeist cases to keep your creep level up. Be so kind and hit subscribe and like button, that would be great help. And yeah, if you like what I do and you want to support my channel, now you can buy me a coffee. All you need to do is to hit that little icon on the right lower corner of my channel banner and we can enjoy the coffee together. That would be greatly appreciated. Okay, let's get down to business. Rosenheim poltergeist is one of the best documented poltergeist infestations in Germany, or indeed in the world. This event took place in a city called Rosenheim in southern Bavaria, more specific in the office of a lawyer Zygmunt Adam. Starting in 1969, strange phenomena began in the office. The lights would turn themselves off and on again and swing. Telephones would ring without anybody apparently calling. Photocopy machine would spill their copy fluid and the desk drawers would open without being touched. The Deutsche Post installed instruments to record phone calls which were never made. Within 5 weeks, the instruments recorded roughly 600 calls to the speaking clock, even though all the phones in the office were disabled and only Adam himself had the key required to enable them. In one 15 minutes period, the speaking clock has been called 46 times, sometimes at a rate that appeared impossible with the mechanical dialing system of 1967. In October 1967, old light bulbs went out with a huge bang. The police, the electric company and others tried to find an explanation for all this, for weeks until they gave up with no useful explanation. Thereafter a team of scientists, including the renowned parapsychologist Hans Bender and two Max Planck Institute physicists, began investigating the case. After installing cameras and voice recorders, they were able to discover that the events only took place when 19-year-old Annemarie Schneider, a recently employed secretary, was present. Bender was able to document on video how the lights immediately started to flicker once she entered the office. It was claimed that the lampshade would swing violently when Miss Schneider walked beneath it. After questioning Miss Schneider, it was discovered that she had recently gone through a serious personal relationship trauma. It was also noted that Miss Schneider suffered from non-specific neurosis. Interestingly, once she was sent on vacation, the poltergeist activity stopped. Annemarie Schneider was dismissed from the company when the event begins anew after she returned. There are no other records of any further poltergeist activity since then. The Rosenheim poltergeist case have become an extremely contentious issue. While some claim that it proves the existence of paranormal phenomenon, critics maintain it was set up and faked, or simply an attention-seeking prank developed by emotionally disturbed Miss Schneider. There is also no evidence on video that matches the more extreme and therefore paranormal events said to have occurred. However, the police officers present and others unconnected with the company, such as Karger and Zisha from the Max Planck Institute, did give official statements claiming to have witnessed unexplained object movements, and Annemarie Schneider was never actually caught faking the phenomenon. Tina Resch was a central figure in a series of incidents that came to be called the Columbus poltergeist case. In 1984, alleged telekinesis events at her Columbus, Ohio home drew significant news media interest. A series of color photographs taken by photojournalist Fred Shannon and published by the Columbus Dispatch was purported to show Rash sitting in the armchair with a telephone handset and the phone cord flying in front of her. Rash's story and Shannon photography were featured on the 1993 episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Skeptics and debunkers pointed out that much of the proclaimed evidence was anecdotal and thin and declared the case to be a hoax. Paul Kurtz wrote that Rash was a disturbed teenager who faked poltergeist phenomena because she craved attention. Rash was married and divorced twice and had a child named Amber Boyer. In 1994, facing a potential death penalty if she agreed to go to trial before jury, Rash instead accepted a plea bargain with prosecutors to being responsible for the death of her 3-year-old daughter that had occurred while the daughter was being looked by her boyfriend, and she was sentenced to the life imprisonment. Tina Rash is adopted daughter of John and John Rash, who were physically abusive to her. The Rashes were well known in Columbus, as they were foster parents who had helped care for 250 children prior to 1984. When she was 14, Tina watched the movie Poltergeist, and shortly afterward the family reported seeing objects fly around the house. Reporter Mike Harden of the Columbus Dispatch was asked to assist the family, and involved photographer Fred Shannon. The Columbus Dispatch interviewed Tina and later published several photos to show a telephone flying through the air. Parapsychologist William Roll stayed in the Rash house to investigate the case and claimed that there had been genuine spontaneous psychokinesis. Roll, however, never observed any object move by itself. In one incident, a picture fell from a wall in upstairs room, where Tina had been alone half an hour before. Roll was facing away from the picture when it fell. James Randi, an investigator for the Committee of the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, was refused access to the household, but investigated the case and suspected Tina had faked the alleged poltergeist occurrences. According to Terence Hines, the Rash poltergeist turned out to be so elusive that no one ever actually saw a single object even start to move of its own accord. This included the newspaper photographer, who found that if he watched an object, it stubbornly refused to budge, so he would hold up his camera and look away. One of the photos obtained in this way was distributed by the Associated Press and touted widely as proof of the reality of the phenomenon. Examined closely, the photographic evidence in this case strongly suggested that Tina was faking the occurrences by simply throwing the phone and other flying objects when no one was looking. Randy's careful analysis of the other photos, many unpublished, of Tina and her flying phone strengthened the conclusion that she was faking. The editor of the Columbus Dispatch, Luke Fack, embarrassed by the revelation that he and his paper were taken by so obvious fake, refused Randy permission to print the photos he had given him earlier, in an apparent attempt to suppress the evidence of Tina's trickery and the newspaper's credibility. In a later incident, a visiting television crew left a video camera on, which caught footage of Tina deliberately knocking over a table lamp, then screaming as if in fright, an event that had previously been ascribed to the poltergeist. When confronted with the videotape, Tina claimed she had done it to get the reporters to leave. Randy characterized the situation as hoaxed by an adolescent girl seeking attention, saying, "Examination of available material indicates that fraudulent means of perfectly explainable methods have been employed to provide the media with sensational details about an otherwise trivial matter." Randy examined the roll of photos taken by press photographers and said that they showed the girl's foot hooked beneath a sofa that had moved by itself. and that the glass in the picture frame that allegedly shattered on its own while in her hands was already broken before she even picked it up. Before we continue with today's video, please consider doing these 3 simple things. Subscribe, like and share. It will help me a lot and it will only take you a second. His conclusion of the case, as he reported in Skeptical Inquirer spring 1985, was as follows. The evidence for the validity of poltergeist claims in this case is anecdotal and thin at best. The evidence against them is, in my estimation, strong and convincing. Tina Resch married and divorced twice, changing her name to Christina Boyer, and had a daughter named Amber. In April 1992, at the age of 3, Amber was found dead, suspected to have been beaten to death. Boyer and David Herring, her boyfriend of few months, were arrested and tried for the murder of Amber. Tina was not present at the time of the death of her daughter, who had been left in Herring's care at the time. The medical examiner at Herring's trial testified that the cause of Amber's death was blunt force trauma she received to her head, inflicted shortly before her death, and both Tina and Herring blamed each other for the injuries. Even as the Unsolved Mysteries segment about Tina premiered on May 19, 1993, Boyer was sitting in jail and awaiting trial. At the time, the Unsolved Mysteries segment made no mention of the criminal charges against Tina. Tina was charged with aggravated battery, and in October 1994, rather than face trial and the possibility of death sentence, Boyer agreed to plea bargain negotiated by her attorney and district attorney Peter Skandalikis. She entered a Alford plea, in which she pleaded guilty while maintaining her innocence. Tina received a life sentence plus 20 years, with the possibility of parole. David Herring was convicted of cruelty to children and sentenced to 20 years. He was released from Dooley State Prison on November 16, 2018. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution referred to Boyer as the telekinetic mom in some of its reportings on legal issues in 1994. In 2004, William Roll collaborated with writer Valerie Stories on a book entitled Unleashed of Poltergeists and Murder, The Curious Story of Tina Resch. The book claims Tina possessed telekinetic powers and was innocent in the death of Amber. Since 2008, Boyer has been incarcerated in Polanski State Prison in Georgia. The Great Amherst Mystery was a notorious case of reported poltergeist activity in Amherst, Nova Scotia, Canada between 1878 and 1879. It was the subject of an investigation by Walter Hubbell, an actor with an interest in psychic phenomena, who kept what he claimed was a diary of events in the house, later expanded into a popular book. The Amherst mystery centered on Esther Cox, who lived in the house with her married sister, Olive Teed, Olive's husband Daniel, and 2 young children. A brother and sister of Esther and Olive also lived in the house, as did Daniel's brother John Teed. According to Hubbell's account, events began at the end of August 1878, after Esther Cox, then aged 18, was subjected to an attempted sexual assault by a male friend. This left her in great distress, and shortly after the physical phenomena began. There were knockings, bangings and rustlings in the night, and Esther herself began to suffer seizures in which her body visibly swallowed and she was feverish and chilled by turns. Then objects in the house took flight. The frightened family called in a doctor. During his visit, bedclothes moved, scratching noises were heard, and the words,
"Esther Cox, you are mine to kill,"
appeared on the wall by the head of Esther's bed. The following day, doctor administered sedative to Esther to calm her and help her sleep. when upon more noises and flying objects manifested themselves. Attempts to communicate with the spirit resulted in tapped responses to questions. The phenomena continued for some months and became well known locally. Visitors to the cottage, including clergymen, heard banging and knocking and witnessed moving objects, often when Esther herself was under close observation. In December, Esther fell ill with diphtheria. No phenomena were observed during the 2 weeks she spent in bed, nor during the time she spent recuperating after at the home of a married sister in Sackville, New Brunswick. However, when she returned to Amherst, the mysterious events began again, this time involving the outbreaks of fire in various places in the house. Esther herself now claimed to see the ghost, which threatened to burn the house down unless she left. In January 1879, Esther moved in with another local family, but the manifestations around her continued and were witnessed by many people, some of whom conversed with the ghost by questioning and rapped answers. Some were curious and sympathetic, others believed Esther herself to be responsible for the phenomena, and she was met with some hostility locally. Esther was frequently slapped, pricked and scratched by the ghost, and on one occasion was stabbed in the back with a clasp knife. Interest in the case grew as the news spread, and in late March Esther spent some time in St. John, New Brunswick, where she was investigated by some local gentlemen with an interest in science. By now, several distinct spirits were apparently associated with Esther and communicated with onlookers via knocking and rapping. Bob Nickel, the original ghost, claimed to have been a shoemaker in life, and others identified themselves as Peter Cox, a relative of Esther, and Maggie Fisher. After the visit to St. John, Esther spent some time with the Van Ambers, friends with a peaceful farm near Amherst, and then returned to the Teeds cottage in the summer of 1879, whereupon the phenomenon broke out again. It was at that point that Walter Hubble arrived, attracted by publicity surrounding the case, and moved into the Teeds cottage as a lodger to investigate the phenomena. Hubble spent some weeks with Esther and her family and reported having personally witnessed moving objects, fires and items appearing from nowhere, and claimed that he saw phenomena occur even when Esther herself was in full view and obviously unconnected with them. He also claimed to have witnessed attacks on Esther with pins and other sharp objects, and to have seen her in several of her fits of extreme swelling and pain. He communicated with various named spirits by rapping and listening to 3 others, Mary Fisher, Jane Nickel and Elijah McNeil, who were also manifesting themselves as part of events. With Hubble's professional help, Esther Cox embarked on the speaking tour, attracting audience who paid to see her and hear her story. However, she met with some hostile reactions, and after she was heckled one night, a disturbance broke out and the attempt was abandoned. She returned to Amherst once more, working for a man named Arthur Davison, but after his barn burned down, he accused her of arson and she was convicted and sentenced to 4 months in prison, although she was released after only 1. After this, the phenomena gradually ceased for good. Esther Cox subsequently married twice, having a son by each of her husbands. She moved to Brockton, Massachusetts with her second husband and died on 8 November 1912, aged 52. Hubble's book was published in 1879 and proved popular, selling at least 55,000 copies. The Amherst case was also investigated by the British paranormal researcher Herward Carrington, who took statements from surviving witnesses of the event in 1907 and published them along with a detailed account of the case in 1913. Other researchers look at the case more critically than Hubble, in particular Dr. Walter Prince in the Proceedings of American Society of Psychical Research made a detailed case for trickery by Esther Cox while in dissociative state. It has been suggested that certain aspects of the alleged paranormal events at Burley Rectory, sometimes dubbed the most haunted house in England, may be linked to the Amherst case. The experiences of the Foister family there in early 1930s, in particular claims that writing appear mysteriously on the wall, resemble events in the Teed household. Reverend Foister has previously lived at Sackville, near Brunswick, and may well have been aware of the case of Esther Cox. Ballyhin House was a Georgian estate home near Grand Tully, Petershire, Scotland. It was built in 1806 on the site of an old manor house which has been owned by the Stuart family since the 15th century. In 1834, Major Robert Stuart inherited the house and rented it to tenants while he served in the Indian Army. During his time in India, Stuart came to believe in reincarnation and transmigration. He returned to the house in 1850 and lived there with his many dogs. He is reported to have stated that he would return in the form of a dog. Major Stuart was unmarried, but local gossip linked his name with that of his much younger housekeeper, who died there in 1873. After the Major's death, the house was inherited by his nephew John Skinner, who assumed the name Stuart. Fearing that his uncle would reincarnate in the form of one of his dogs, the new owner reportedly shot them all. From this story came the legend that Robert Stuart was forced to haunt the house as a disembodied spirit. The first reported haunting at the house took place in 1876. The witness was a maid in the house. In 1897, an investigation of the house was organized by John Stuart, 3rd Marquis of Bute, with the assistance of paranormal researchers from the Society for Psychical Research. Ballyhin House was known as the most haunted house in Scotland, with several similarities to the Borley Rectory haunting, including the alleged apparition of a ghostly nun. The team of investigators from the Society for Psychical Research included Colonel Taylor and the notorious Ada Godrich Freer. In 1899, the alleged haunting of B House by Stuart and Freer was published and serialized in the Times, containing a journal of phenomena kept by Freer. Calendar Ross, who had stayed at the house, stated in the Times that there were no evidence for any supernatural disturbances, and considered the whole investigation to be fraudulent. The SPR later removed material from a volume of their proceedings on the investigation and denounced Freer. Psychical researcher Frederick Myers, who was originally supportive of the investigation, wrote in a letter to the Times he greatly doubted where there was anything supernormal at the house. Trevor Hull revealed that Freer was unreliable investigator, had deceived the SPR, plagiarized material and lied about her own life. Ballyhin House was uninhabited by 1932 and the most of the house was demolished in 1963 after a fire, leaving only the former servant quarters and outbuildings. So what do you guys think about all of this? Leave your comments down below. If you have any interesting stories you would like to share, true, fictional, creepypasta, legends, whatever fits channel content, send it my way. Emails are on the screen and in the description box. If you need copyright-free background videos, visit my other channel, Monarch Free Videos, and see if there's something you can use in your own creation, and no need to ask for permission. Before you leave, don't forget about that coffee. Until the next time, stay safe.